Hello everybody and welcome to a new lag poker video. Today we are going to explore a very weird strategy. In today's video we are gonna use GTO Wizard, I would say a phenomenal tool when we want to study and be quite efficient with our time in the study of GTO. And I wanted to do something different from what probably you've seen so far, because a way I like to use the solver, especially something quick as GTO Wizard, is to explore alternative strategies, maybe even unconventional ones, to see how they work, to see what should they do when I take a weird line, and so to understand also very different strategies from what I'm normally used to. One of the weirdest things we can see is what would happen if you check back on a board like this. So in this spot, this is a single raise spot, button versus big blind, and we will focus on the button perspective. And if we try to use the GTO approach, what is going to happen is that the solver, GTO Wizard Elite, would choose to bet 55% size around 43% of the times. This is also this is already very different from what most players will do. I think more players here quite by instinct, I would say, they would just bet range with size 1/3. And the first thing I would like to see is how different this strategy, so betting range 1/3 here, how different is from the GTO in terms of EV. So what I like to do is, before I start actually playing with a solution, I like to see which is the EV of both the big blind and the button at the very beginning of the tree, and see how the EV changes when I do my node locks. So here in this example, we see that the button at the beginning of the hand on this flop is going to have 2.91 EV blinds, and what I define as an acceptable deviation, usually when I make my solutions and my simplifications, is at 3% from that. It's very easy to calculate. I will now just put it here. So you just use a calculator, you put 2.91 and you multiply it by 0.03 and 0.08, well, 0.09 if you want to make it even. It's the maximum EV deviation that I would understand, that I would consider acceptable in this spot. So everything which is gonna give me at least on the button 2.82 EV is something that I would say is acceptable. Everything below that is maybe not this efficient. So let's start by thinking at what is gonna happen when we bet range. So when we bet range, let's see how our EV changes, and it's fairly easy to do it with GTO Wizard. We just go here, we just edit the action, not even need to node lock, we just delete the check, and we just, let's assume we bet 33% as a sizing, and what is gonna happen is that GTO Wizard will just do this, and that's pretty much it. If I go here back on the button, on the big blind, which was, by the way, already locked for not having a donk betting range, because I think most people will not donk bet here, we will see that now DV is 2.77. It's quite a big decrease in terms of what we had before, more than we wanted to. So I would say usually here simplifying this way is not that optimal. Also, I would say the answer of the big blind to this strategy is something which is extreme, yes, but let's say that, you know, what is going to happen is that maybe they're going to raise a bit less, and let's see how this maybe affects the EV, but I don't think it's going to affect it much. So let's presume they just fall the same and they just call a bit more and raise a bit less. Let's say they raise 13-14%, which I think is could be the case, and we just block everything. And let's see if, I mean, our EV is probably going to increase a bit, but still, I don't think it's going to be high enough. Well, 2.83, we are just right there if our opponents are not gonna raise enough. But yeah, I mean, still, we're borderline. So something I like to do in this case is to see how different stuff affect our EV. And something very interesting I see is what if we check back here our entire range? That's very weird strategy. That's something which you never think about it in a spot like this. I'm not saying you should actually do it frequently, but to study just the solution and to understand better the spot, I would say it may be interesting to see what happens. So we do the same thing. We just remove the betting option, and now the button is going to be forced to check. We confirm this, and we go to compare the EV now from the previous solutions, and surprisingly, so far, this is the best EV. I mean, this gives the best EV among the simplifications we just did. It's even better than betting range when our opponent is not raising enough. And if you think about it, it's quite insane, because you never think that checking back on a spot like this, king 8-7 with a flush draw, is going to give you an amount of EV so close to what is optimal. But something I think is interesting now to see is, okay, let's say we check range, what is going to happen in this hand? I would say it's important to see how the big blind should respond to this strategy when we check back, and he knows we check back. And also, I would like to see the EV of us checking back range, but our opponent not adjusting, which is going to be very interesting. So we check back, and let's take a brick turn, for example. Let's say the 2 of spades. We see that there is a very, very low leading out range from the big blind. It's obvious, no? Because this spot is not that great for the big blind. And we check back our whole range, and of course we still have all our decent hands. So whatever was optimal on a flop, of course it's gonna somewhat translate on a blank turn. And sorry for these messages, next time I'm gonna have to turn off WhatsApp. And so it's quite obvious that if we have no betting range on the flop, on the button, our opponent will not be able to lead out a lot on the turn, because again, our range is still strong. And then after he checks, we have, as you see, a betting frequency which would be quite similar to what the optimal C betting frequency was on the flop, even if you bet a bit bigger here. But yeah, as you see, I mean, we basically use the same strategy we had on the flop, we just use it on the turn, pretty much. In this case, it bets this size, but let's say we want to keep betting as we wanted to bet on the flop. I don't advise that, but just to show you that if we even sorry, I will succeed in saying that if we keep the same sizings, probably the frequency will go up, and it's going to be very similar to what was the flop before. Yeah, as you see, 40%, 41. It was 43% C betting frequency on the flop. So by checking back, what is going to happen on a blank turn like this is that, in theory, what would be our betting strategy on the flop, we replicate the same on a blank turn like this. Maybe a bit different on a different turn, because if we take a very connected turn, of course now I expect the big blind to lead out a bit more frequently. Yeah, almost twice as before, because now, of course, while the flop was okay for us and the blank turn didn't change anything, this 6 maybe helps a bit more the big blind, and so it's obvious that the big blind is gonna like it a bit more, and he may be in an advantage compared to how it was on the flop. And even if he checks, now we see our strategy is completely different. Now we choose to bet smaller, because now the board is much different. And also, if we deny the big blind to bet, which I don't think is gonna happen much, what we're gonna see is that probably the betting frequency and strategy is gonna change again on the button, betting less and bigger, as you see. if the big blind never leads out, still we cannot. We have to be way more conservative than in the previous spots. But now let's presume that our opponent doesn't know that we're checking back our whole range. That is likely the case because, let's be honest, nobody would expect us to check back range on a flop like this. So what I'm gonna do now is that I'm gonna see how the big blind should lead out in a GTO solution, because that's probably something very similar to what is gonna happen in game when our opponent expects us to bet sometimes and sometimes not on the flop. So what we're gonna do is gonna see which is gonna be the betting strategy of the big blind on the turn, on this turn, on a GTO spot, and we are going to force him to do the same in this specific situation. And then we are gonna see how DV changes compared to what would optimally happen if he knew that we were checking back range. So to do that, let's go back to our original GTO solution, which is this one. And we have the big blind checking. We are gonna check back now in this solution. Again, our opponent, if he sees us checking back, he's gonna think we're going to do something like this. He will not think, hey, this guy's checking back range. He's gonna think, of course, well, sometimes he's betting, sometimes he's checking. And so what I'm gonna do on the turn is betting as the solver would bet when a guy here checks. Or at least if this guy, of course, studies the situation, obviously. So now we're gonna check back, use a spade on the river, and this is the strategy. So what he should do in this case, if on the button we are playing the flop somewhat GTO, he should lead out for 151% size and around 23.1% of the times. Then now let's do it again. Let's go back to the checking back strategy. So here we're gonna just edit and remove this. Check back, deuce of spades. As you see, of course, now the big blind is adjusting for us not betting the flop, but we'll pretend he doesn't know that. And we go to see DV. Of course, DV now is different because on the flop, you may think, well, how did he change DV when the flop was check forced together? Obviously, because deuce of spades hits, and so it's a bit better for us on the button, and of course our DV on this deuce of spades slightly increased. But what I want to see is how does it change his 2.88 when our opponent on this turn is not gonna do that, but it's gonna do an overbet of 151% of the pot, 23.1% of the times. We are now gonna have our answer. Of course, if you choose this sizing, he should almost never do it. But again, he doesn't know we are actually not betting the flop, so he's probably gonna do it anyway. So we make him bet 23% of the times, lock the node, and voila, to our strategy. And if we are gonna now see DV, we're gonna see that the button gained a huge amount of EV. So what can we say? I mean, sorry for that terrible noise. I just hit the table with my knee and it was painful. So what can we say about this strategy? Is it something that I advise you to do frequently? No, not by any means. In the sense that in this strategy, I still see some kind of problem. Mainly, it's going to be very difficult to maximize our value, and rather than doing that in a real game, I would probably do something like checking a lot, but still betting a decent amount of my top value hands. But I would say what makes this interesting is that, if you experiment in these kind of strategies using a solver like GTO Wizard, you are gonna find very weird and unexpected ways to exploit your better opponents, because again, this is not something I would ever consider versus somebody who is a bad player. I'm just gonna use a betting strategy, which gonna fits the case. But if my opponent is very strong, let's say, let's presume he knows how GTO works, and he knows that if I check back on that flop, he's gonna have to use a strategy similar to this. Well, in this case, what I would say it can happen is that maybe for me, finding a new strategy, a weird strategy like this one, and knowing how it develops, knowing what to expect, knowing that is not that bad for me to check back range, and using this unexpected strategy versus somebody who is a very strong player, I think it may be interesting. I think it's important to have in our options some alternative strategies which can put very good players in a tough spot and oblige them to do some mistakes. So yeah, I mean, I encourage you to work with the solvers, not only on the standard solutions, but also try to have some alternatives for the best opponents, something that is gonna put them off their comfort zone, something which is gonna oblige them to do some mistakes. That was it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments if you did, or not even. And thanks for watching. See you at the next video.